Oh, hi everyone, Big Thinny Septano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a classic review of this Waka Flocka Flame album, Flockaveli. This is the 2010 debut full-length LP of Atlanta rapper Waka Flocka Flame, which turns 14 this year. It is one of the more recent releases that I have chosen for a classic review over the years. Why? Well, mostly because when it originally dropped, I didn't really appreciate it for what it was, nor did I see the sea change it would bring for the next decade coming either. I mean, I didn't go out of my way to hate on the record, but I didn't really cover it either, which in retrospect I am kind of surprised about, not just because I enjoyed a lot of the very simple and punchy southern hip-hop that made mainstream waves in the 2000s, but also one of my most spun rap CDs in college was Lil Jon and the East Side Boys' Kings of CRUNK. Not exactly the most lyrical or complicated or nuanced album if you've heard it. And Jon actually has a partial production credit on the song Smoke Drank on this album, so the influence lineage is most certainly there on Flockaveli. But 2010 was one of my first years reviewing music. I was still getting a sense of what it made the most sense to cover at the time and why. And I will admit I did fall victim to a prevailing narrative around hip-hop fans at the time that Waka Flocka Flame was just straight trash, and also represented some new low in terms of the degradation of hip-hop standards. I think that was an easy feeling to latch on to, being an older millennial and having had the standards for what made for good mainstream hip-hop lyricism and artistry set for the past 10 years by the likes of Kanye and Lil Wayne and Jay-Z and Eminem. And as all of you remember, I'm sure, 2010 also finished off with the release of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, an album that brought on so much excitement upon its release. It could have easily brought on this new era of grandiosity and opulence in hip-hop's mainstream, with some cute little indie crossovers here and there. But records like Flockaveli and its league of very young fans had much different plans. Rather than getting more abstract and introspective, we're getting harder, more guarded, angrier, more in your face, more vicious, more mindlessly violent. Yeah, this record was definitely an escalation, not just in terms of Waka Flocka's vocal delivery and his lyricism, but the production on this thing too, which was handled mostly by beatsmith Lex Luger, who Waka had tapped for a few beats on a previous mixtape. Now for this record, I guess they decided to collaborate in a more consistent fashion. And Lex Luger's production for the time really stood out. The perks on these instrumentals were so crisp and so thin, the hi-hats were just constantly rattling, the 808s, the bass was booming. Then you had the most synth-centric production beyond that, that really was almost proud of the fact that it sounded so digital, so artificial, especially with those blaring fake-ass horns all over a track like Hard into Paint. It was brash, it was simple, and it read like a much more potent reduction on the aggressive trap energy that was brought by previous stars in the genre like Young Jeezy and Yo Gotti, as well as T.I. and of course Gucci Mane, who platformed Waka on his 1017 Brick Squad label. And it's weird to think about how different the aesthetics of this record were in 2010, given how now common they feel in 2024. But the wave of hype this record brought on was strong and was immediate. Also hard to ignore even for artists at the top of the rap food chain at the time. Cause this thing dropped in October of 2010, and in less than a year, you had Kanye and Jay-Z teasing this upcoming collaboration, and in preparation for that, putting out this song Ham, which featured Lex Luger production, really going for that trap banger sound, and it was not very well received by Kanye and Jay-Z fans at the time. And that was due in part to it being a change in style and sound, but on top of that, the opening Kanye verse was trash, even by his current standards of lyricism on his more recent projects. And the whole thing kind of felt like fitting a square peg into a round hole in terms of capturing this raw trap energy, but still trying to stay true to this super grand and lavish vision that Kanye had for his music in this era of his career, which is how you end up in a place where you have these stuttering synths, booming 808s, and a fucking opera singer. In other words, Garbaggio. And the truth is that Lex Luger Waka Flocka formula doesn't need all that extra rigmarole to be good or artistically valid. It's fine on its own. Like in the case of the opening track on this thing, Bustin' At 'Em, with its non-stop shots of bass as well as actual gunshots. There's almost more gun samples than there are drum sounds on this track, which is kind of the case for a lot of songs on this record. And while Waka does rap all over the song and handle the chorus too, the appeal of the track doesn't come down to what he's saying as much as how it sounds, because his ad-libs and his delivery has a real bite to it. It's animalistic. He sounds like a junkyard pit bull barking at you, just on the other side of a kind of rundown chain link fence. It's the kind of thing that you get when you strip a genre or a sound down to its most bare elements and then whatever's left, turn it up to 11, which kind of makes it punk in its own right. Now, I will admit, this is not the most versatile album under the sun. Many of the tracks to follow bring a very similar vibe and formula with some slight variations to scratch some different itches. With Hard in the Paint's horn lines and gigantic chorus that I mentioned earlier, this is one of the more anthemic hits on this thing. Meanwhile, TTG is not quite as hype by comparison, a bit more threatening instead with some key features from the likes of French Montana. No Hands is an absolutely legendary club hit from 2010 with some great melodic vocal lines. It's kind of odd that someone as aggressive as Waka Flocka would come through with one of the strongest club tunes of this past decade. Brick Squad is pretty much a Brick Squad anthem, Flocka shouting out his group, his label that he's affiliated with, talking them up as being the new NWA, the new Wu-Tang. I mean, obviously that didn't really pan out, but his ambitions and sights at the time were set high. And who knows, maybe with some better artistic vision or management at the time, it could have happened. Fuck the Club Up is an absolutely wild, off-the-wall, aggressive, go crazy in the club anthem that still holds resonance to this day, considering the fact that Nicki Minaj's latest record samples it. And with Grove Street Party, it's kind of rare that you get an album just in general, but also an album this aggressive coming through with multiple great party anthems. Oh Let's Do It is a great 2009 single from Waka that kind of carried over onto this record. On Live by the Gun, Waka is seen just kind of like looking death in the face and laughing. The attitude of the track just reads as very morbid, very dark, and kind of fatalistic. For My Dogs is a more low-key moment that works pretty well, given that it is one of the more maybe slightly personal and emotional spots on the record where Flocka kind of goes on about his devotion to his friends and those committed to him. The lyrical themes of G-Check are pretty apparent once you look into them on the surface. What kind of blows me away about this track, though, is how many gun sound effects can you work into a single track, into a single mix? And again, that's just the thing about this record. It's just so damn over the top, with the bass, with the screaming, with the ad-libs, with the guns shooting and fucking reloading. Waka even continues to push the boundaries on the track Snake in the Grass, which not only has a great feature from Cartier Kitten, but those ad-libs in the background from him, he sounds like he's not just kind of barking, but shrieking. I mean, all of these things collectively make this record not only a banger, but kind of uniquely out there and just angry for its time. And few albums since this have matched its just unbridled angry energy. And I think in a way he became a victim of his own success. First off, I don't really vibe with the narrative that he only did this record or made music like this for the money and sort of just dumbed down rap for his own benefit, because number one, before this album came out, he had no fucking way of knowing that this record would hit in the way that it did, that it would have the impact that it would. And two, Flocka arguably didn't really see the success of his influence influence in the way that he could have or should have, as I don't really think he successfully rode through the polarizing waves of love and hate that came his way as a result of this record, because while there was a young generation of music fans that were very much embracing him, there was an entire industry of old heads and established artists and just fans who were around my age or had sort of maybe my level of experience and familiarity with rap music who absolutely just hated what he did, and again, thought he was trash, thought he was a hack, thought he was talentless, thought he was just total shit. And in a way, I think Flocka's immediate follow-up albums were a reflection of this reaction in a way, because he wasn't going quite as aggressive, and in some respects it felt like he was trying to, especially on Triple F, make an attempt to take his sound and give it more of a pop or a commercial appeal with friendlier features, not going as crazy on the lead vocals or the ad-libs, toning it down a bit on the screaming and the gunshots and all that. And frankly, I just kind of think that was the wrong move, especially given what he had seen so much success doing right out of the gate. It wouldn't really be until his 2015 Flockaveli 1.5 mixtape that he would fully embrace once again the sound that put him on the map once more, but by then it was kind of too late. The die had been cast, the formula for what made Flockaveli had already been spread around and copied numerous times over, as there was already a new generation of producers and rappers out there willing to take charge. I mean, Rick Ross had also already put out Teflon Don the same year in 2010 and was continuing to see success past that point, as I think he did a better job of walking that balancing act of making music that had a very aggressive, trappy, ignorant appeal, but he didn't dumb down his lyricism too much or act too over the top on his records. He could get lyrical when he needed to. Also, records like Trap Lord had dropped since then. Migos came through with their big breakout tapes, and Versace, Chicago Drill, and Chief Keef's come up were both very much underway at the time too. And Dat Piff culture was also very popular at the time, and basically any rapper on the trap circuit that was seeing a moderate amount of success over there could easily be scooped up by any number of labels and put up on a pedestal and sort of just shifted into a cash cow. So in a way, you could say while this record does have a lot of influence, some of that influence may not necessarily be good. However, that's not really a burden I put on Waka Flocka Flame or Lex Luger for that matter, because again, at the time, they had no way of knowing what kind of impact their music would have. They were just making tracks that were true to them at the time. And as far as taking the sound and dumbing it down and replicating it and copying it and distributing it and redistributing it through a bunch of artists that are having like these 15 minutes of fame cycles, that's not Waka Flocka Flame doing that. That's the industry. So while this album, in my opinion, is great and has aged well, it was also kind of a canary in the coal mine too, and received a lot of negative attention at the time, and labels and promoters collectively understood that they could essentially turn a profit on this same music through other artists rather than essentially trying to continue pushing this one act that already had like this negative connotation attached to it. Plus, on top of it, Waka Flocka Flame was most likely skeptical of whatever exploitative opportunities were being handed to him in the music industry at this point. Case in point, the closing track of this record, the incredible Fuck This Industry, where he tributes his loved ones and his family and also kind of goes in on 360 deals and stuff like that. And unfortunately, in the music world, that kind of sentiment is not going to get you far, because labels want somebody they can make money off of, even if they are making music and delivering a sound that is hitting and honestly changing the face of rap as we know it. Which, love this record or hate it, I think you could pretty definitively say it did, as it did kind of usher in this new sound of trap music that embraced hookiness and energy and simplicity and repetition over a lot of the more complex standards that hip-hop had been maintaining up until that point. And to me, that long-standing impact that at this point is going to continue to be felt, combined with the boldness that this record came with out of the gate, is what makes it a classic for me. It just really had the boldness and the balls to go bow, 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 bow. And there you go. That's my review. my thoughts on this record. Thank you very much for watching. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Waka Flocka Flame of Forever.